In local matters, voters in Vermont will head to the polls next month to cast their ballots in this year's primary races. That's where independent Senator Bernie Sanders is running for the Democratic nomination this year, but says he won't accept it even if he wins.
It's a political maneuver that will allow him to later run as an independent, making it virtually impossible for another Democrat to seek the party's nod. Jane Lindholm is the host of Vermont Edition on Vermont's Public Radio. She joins us now from Colchester, Vermont. Now, this isn't the first time, Jane, that Bernie Sanders has used this political strategy. So what does the race look like?
You know, it's interesting. Bernie Sanders is a very popular politician in Vermont, as he seems to be around the nation. So he is facing a challenger in the Democratic primary, but it usually happens that he gets the nod without much trouble. And then, yes, he'll refuse it and run as an independent.
Well, this, of course, comes in the wake of a huge upset here in New York, where a former Bernie Sanders campaign organizer defeated a longtime Democratic incumbent. Now, are you getting the sense that out there in Vermont, voters also want to see someone that's more focused on the state and local and less on the national issues?
I'm not sure. I think Bernie Sanders gets a little bit of a pass. He has been advocating the same kinds of policies in Vermont and in Congress for more than 20 years here. And so I think Vermonters give him a little bit of leeway in advocating for national issues, being out on the national scene, advocating for other politicians. Our Revolution, the super PAC aligned with Bernie Sanders, has not endorsed any Vermont politicians. He does seem very nationally focused, but the focuses of his attention are really things that he's been working on in Vermont for a long time. He's also not endorsing other candidates that represent his values in statewide and federal elections here in Vermont. So it's a little bit of a mixed bag.
Jane, what are some of the issues that are driving voters to the polls this year?
In Vermont, a lot of national issues are certainly big drivers. We see voters in Vermont really concerned about Donald Trump's immigration policies. We are, of course, a border state with Canada, so immigration is a big issue here in Vermont. In terms of local issues, there are two things that we've been following that are pretty interesting and could affect some of the big local races. One of them is that our Republican governor, Phil Scott, advocated for and then signed into law some sweeping new gun restrictions this spring. And that was a real break with the party. It was also a break with his previously stated ideas about gun rights. Vermont has had some of the least restrictive gun measures on the books of any state in the nation. So we'll see if his about-face affects him in November. We're also going to be looking at who benefits and who loses from a budget stalemate that the legislature and the governor have been having really up until a week before July 1st. Vermont is facing the unusual situation of maybe having a government shutdown, which we typically don't have. And the governor finally was the one to blink. He allowed a budget to go into law without his signature, just narrowly avoiding a budget government shutdown on July 1st.
You mentioned Governor Scott. He is running actually for re-election on a pro-gun restriction platform. So what does the race for governor look like on the Republican side?
On the Republican side, Governor Phil Scott is facing a Republican challenger, Keith Stern, who does not support the governor's policy, the changes that we've made. And, I don't think Governor Scott would say he's running on a platform of gun restrictions anymore because we passed them into law. They are now Vermont law. But there are people running on both the Republican ticket and the Democratic ticket who would very much like to change those laws and bring Vermont back to the gun policies that we had before.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about the Democratic side. What is the field looking like on the other side of the aisle?
It's a little bit of a crowded field right now, and it's an interesting race to watch. There are several Democrats. We have James Ellers, who's known as an environmental activist, who's really running, very much to the left side of politics. We have Christine Hallquist, who just stepped down as an energy CEO. She is running as a Democrat. She's also gaining some notoriety nationwide because she is a transgender candidate for governor. We have Brenda Siegel, who is also on the farther left side of things, who's running. Ethan Sonneborn, who's 14 and running for governor. And we have a write-in candidate named John Rogers, who's currently a state senator. He is a Democrat, but he is running on a platform of pulling back on Vermont's gun restrictions.
Wow, quite a field. This will definitely be a set of races to watch. Jane Lindholm, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.